As chair of the commission, I call this meeting of the Michigan Independent Citizens Redistricting Commission to order at 1:02 p.m. This webinar is being live streamed on YouTube. For anyone in the public watching who would prefer to watch via a different platform than they're currently using, please visit our social media at Redistricting Michigan to find the link for viewing on YouTube. Our live stream today includes closed captioning. Closed captioning, ASL interpretation, and Spanish and Arabic translation services will be provided for effective participation in this meeting. Email us at redistricting@michigan.gov for additional viewing options or details on accessing language translation services for this meeting. People with disabilities needing other specific accommodations should also contact redistricting@michigan.gov. This meeting is being recorded and will be available at www.michigan.gov/MICRC for viewing at a later date. This meeting is also being transcribed, and those transcriptions will be made available at www.michigan.gov/MICRC, along with written public comment submissions. There's also a public comment portal that can be accessed by visiting michigan.gov/MICRC. And this portal can be utilized to post maps and comments, which can be viewed by both the commission and the public. Members of the media who have questions before, after, or during the meeting should direct those questions to Edward Woods III, the Communications and Outreach Director for the Commission. He can be reached at woodse3@michigan.gov. For the purposes of the public watching and the public record, I will turn to Department of State staff to take note of the commissioners present.
Good afternoon. Hello? Hello? Okay. Hi, commissioners. Good afternoon. Please stay present when I call your name. If you are attending the meeting remotely, please announce during roll call that you are attending the meeting remotely. And unless your absence is due to military duty, please announce your physical location by stating the county, city, township, or village, and the state from which you are attending the meeting remotely. I will start with Doug Clark.
Present.
Juanita Curry.
Present.
Anthony Eade. Brittany Kellum.
Present.
Rhonda Lang.
Present, attending remotely from Reed City, Michigan.
Steve Lett.
Present.
Cynthia Orton.
Present, attending remotely from Battle Creek, Michigan.
MC Rothhorn.
Present.
Rebecca Satella.
Present.
Janice Follett.
Present.
Aaron Wagner.
Present, attending remotely from Charlotte, Michigan.
Richard Weiss.
Present.
Dustin Witches.
Present.
Present.
12 of 13 commissioners are present, and there is a quorum.
Thank you, Michigan Department of State staff, Sarah Reinhardt. We'll move to the adoption of the agenda. As a reminder to the public watching, you can also view the agenda at our common website, www.michigan.gov/MICRC. If there are no changes to the agenda, I would now entertain a motion to approve the meeting agenda.
So moved.
Motion made by Commissioner Rothhorn, second made by Commissioner Lett. Is there any discussion or debate on the motion? Hearing none, it is moved and second that the agenda be adopted and approved. All in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
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 All opposed, raise your hand and say nay. The ayes have it, the motion carries. Moving on to item 5, public comment pertaining to agenda topics. For today's meeting, we do not have any live or remote public comment. So we are going to move to
Madam Chair, we do have one participant for remote public comment.
Okay, my apologies. We have one remote public comment, so I will give a few reminders about how our remote public comment goes. If there are no objections. Okay, hearing no objection, we'll proceed with public comment pertaining to agenda topics only. You will have 2 minutes to address the commission. After you conclude when you hear the timer, please conclude your remarks. Michigan Department of State staff will say your name and they'll introduce you and they will unmute you. If you are on a computer, you will be prompted by the Zoom app to unmute your microphone and speak. If you are using a telephone, a voice will say the host would like you to speak and prompt you to press *6 to unmute. Again, Department of State staff will introduce you. And if we don't hear from you, if there are any technical or audio issues for about 3 to 5 seconds, we'll move on to the next person. In this case, we only have one present. And then we'll return to you after the next person is done speaking. If your audio still does not work, you can email us at redistricting@michigan.gov and we'll help you troubleshoot so you can participate during the next public comment period or at a later hearing or meeting. At this time, I will turn to Michigan Department of State staff who will handle our first remote comment.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're
Our first
welcome.
public comment participant is Mr. James Gallant. Please allow us a moment to unmute you. Mr. Gallant, you are unmuted and you may proceed with your public comment.
Hello? Hello?
Yes, we can hear
Can you hear
you.
me? All right, this time, quick. I had a little problem with the last one at the last meeting, and now I think I got it. This is James Gallant with Marquette County Suicide Prevention Coalition, and my community of interest is the entire United States of America and its Constitution, including the Constitution of the State of Michigan. And I've come across a couple of anomalies that are of the utmost importance right now at this meeting. I found that 3 applications were disqualified because they were incomplete at the beginning of this process last year. And now going through the applications of the current members, I find that 5 applicants have incomplete applications, and they should resign today, or you should at least instruct your attorney to review the applications and to determine whether they're incomplete or not. Commissioner Lett and Commissioner Kellum both answered choose not to answer when it says that they were supposed to head the questions to ensure that you did not have a conflict of interest. And 3, let me see, 1, 2, 3. I think 3 of them said the exact same answer, choose not to answer, as if they were coached to say that. And it effectively did not answer the question. It says, I choose not to answer. But you have to answer or you're disqualified. And also, Commissioner Eade, there's no date stamp that says that his application was received before the deadline. Every other one of them has a date stamp at the top. His does not. That's because it probably wasn't got before the deadline. And you can't prove it now anyway. So there's 4 of them. Zatella, Lett, Decker, Kellum, and Eade. So far, I haven't even got through all of them yet. And I would ask that you would, this is very important. These are disqualifications, and we need to get new people in right away. And I've contacted the State Department, and Ms. Reinhardt has been helping me on this, and I thank her for that help. And she directed me to all of these, and now folks are unqualified. You can't move forward. You should probably actually cancel this meeting right now, because if you take action with these non-qualified people, then you're actually contradicting the Constitution again. But that seems to be standard practice. And this thing about hearing no objections, the Constitution says all decisions will be made by majority vote at a public meeting. By saying no objections and overriding the Constitution every single time.
Mr. Gallant, your allotted 2 minutes has ended. Please conclude your remarks.
You are out of order, Madam Chair, by using the unanimous consent, because that's the Constitution.
Mr. Gallant, your allotted 2 minutes has ended. Thank you. Now that the first opportunity for both in-person and remote public comment has concluded without objection, we will now hear from individuals seeking to provide a second 2-minute remote public comment. Hearing no objection, we'll now proceed with the individual seeking to provide a second 2-minute public comment. Michigan Department of State staff, I turn the floor over to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Gallant has requested to provide an additional 2 minutes of public comment. Mr. Gallant, you are unmuted and may proceed.
Can you hear me now, Madam Chair?
Yes.
Yes? Okay. I don't appreciate that Sarah Reinhardt just mispronounced my name after she said it, and I said it dozens and dozens of times. That's inappropriate. So please try a little better. James Gallant, Marquette County Suicide Prevention Coalition, Community of Interest, United States of America, Constitution of the State of Michigan. And let's just continue our little, I should be able to get 4 minutes straight up if I get to do this. And, so another issue here is the Robert's Rules of Order, and some are saying you don't have to follow Robert's Rules. And you started, I've been going through the transcript, and it was interesting that I believe it was your colleague, Commissioner Rawthorne, that said at the beginning of the meeting, the first question when it was about process, kind of like committees where we have like committees, like, do we really have to have like a chairman or chairperson of a committee? Well, yeah, because that's what the fundamental principles of parliamentary law in America is. And you folks seem to be wanting to just change that or just not go by it. You're not going to change it. You're just going to just say you're going by Robert's rules. It was testified at the first meeting you were going by Robert's rules. On the record, Commissioner Kellum, you said that you were going by Robert's Rules of Order while you were actually not doing it. Okay? So you're trying to change the dominant narrative of what it means to do Robert's Rules of Order, which you have to have motions first. You have to second the motions. You can't do the unanimous consent. You can't hear no objections. You're doing that all the time. And that is a direct contradiction of the Constitution, which is why this is going to be legally challenged in court. And guess what? It's going to be just before you finish the maps. Because if they do that and then they get it in court, it's not going to be done by next year by the things. We're going to have to wait 10 years to get new maps. And that might be a good strategy for some of the folks out there that don't want the maps to change. And, but this happened in California the last time. I read an article from 2011. This exact same thing happened in California. And you guys are saying you're going by the California model. And the whole thing is,
Mr. Gallant, your allotted 2 minutes has ended.
The Constitution when she did not elect a chair at the first meeting. She didn't do that. She elected a temporary chair. Thank you.
Thank you for providing public commentary to the commission. At this time, we will move to unfinished business if there are no objections. Hearing no objections, we'll move to item 6A and have Kim Brace from Election Data Services continue his presentation from last Thursday at our meeting specifically. And again, hearing no objection, at this time, we'll have Mr. Brace proceed with his presentation. Thank you, Mr. Brace, for being here.
Thank you, commissioners. Thank you again for all of your work. I'm happy to present once again a continuation of last week's presentation. I'm going to flip my screen so that you can see some of my PowerPoints and shares. You'll notice that most people, when I make presentations, I like to start off with something that is a little bit, brings a smile to everybody's face. This morning's newspaper from San Diego, California, says that San Diego pot shops are threatened by redistricting. They have to have pot shops distributed by their councilmanic district. So a new twist to redistricting on that side. I don't think you have that requirement in your state. So let me bring up a PowerPoint for you on that side. Can everyone see this? Yep.
You can see it.
Great. If you remember, we started this episodes back in June 10th. We talked on the census data on June 17th. And today, on June 22nd, I want to talk a little bit about racial data for your education purposes. If you recall, we talked about the data cube. We're down in the lower left-hand side in terms of data from the Census Bureau, and we'll continue with that discussion today. Part of this is all keyed to this elections process and looking at the demographic mix of the electorate at each of these stepping stones. So we're going to end up going down this stepping stone. We talked before about total population, voting age. We'll do a little bit in terms of citizen, not very much, but registration and turnout is kind of the next step. That will be covered next week by our persons dealing with, or on Thursday, with one of our team talking about elections and election data, as well as Lisa Hanley talking about racial Black voting. But for today, I want to talk about two major topics. One is disclosure avoidance and the impact that that has on data, what is coming from the Census Bureau. And then secondly, the racial composition of the population, because I want you to understand some of the dynamics of the racial data that we will be getting from the Census Bureau. The latest timetable from the Census Bureau, of course, is that August 16th, they're still saying we will get the legacy file format of the data. And then by September 20th, that should be 30th, September 30th, the PL file format will be coming out. This is, of course, dependent upon the Alabama court case. And we're still awaiting that decision because that could have a major impact in terms of this timetable and your timetable. But there's nothing yet out of the Alabama court. So let's talk about differential privacy. This is a new thought or process, and we want to talk about the impact on data. What this is, you have to be cognizant that there's not a lot of data that is not going to change. The only data that will not change is the total population of the state of Michigan. That is ingrained. That is what they call invariant. So that is a firm number that we will always have. We talked last week about how that dictates your ideal district sizes and that sort of thing. But this number will not change. Any county and lower level geography, however, will change. And that is what we'll see in this disclosure avoidance. That would include the total population, the voting age population, and all of the data by race. All of that could change from what the Census Bureau really counted on Census Day, or as we know, it kind of extended out for a while. But those are likely and possibly to change. Geography will determine how much of that change will take place. Indeed, but we don't know yet where and how much of that change will take place. That is the uncertainty that's in this data structure coming from the Census Bureau. So far to date, the tests have shown that higher levels of geography won't see much change from the real counts that the Census Bureau counted. So you got to think of it more like polling. There's a margin of error in the data, a plus or minus kind of a circumstance when you hear about polling results on the TV all the time. That's kind of the parameter that you need to think about in terms of the data. It has a margin of error in it. It's an imposed margin of error coming from the Census Bureau to try to protect the privacy of all individuals who answered the census, because the Census Bureau found that they could end up having the potential of people being able to rediscover who answered the census. So they put in this disclosure avoidance. It will probably not totally really affect that much the congressional, state Senate, state House districts, because the final totals of what you come up with in terms of the populations is going to be real close to what the real counts are, because at larger geographic levels, the pluses and minuses will average out. That's the inherent piece of disclosure avoidance. So as we draw things, it probably won't have that big of an impact because we're at this higher geographic levels as we're drawing. The Bureau's statisticians are recommending that you use block groups or higher levels of geography to draw with. Now, that may be possible. That's something that can be explored, certainly in terms of Michigan. Whole townships, for example, is one way of dealing with that. The various things that you might hear from the public. So it's that higher levels of geography where things have kind of evened out. The pluses and minuses have evened out. But so why draw with higher geographies? This disclosure avoidance system has a larger impact on the block data. Those census blocks, these are the things that are going to be impacted by disclosure avoidance. It will be greater impact, the research has shown, in rural areas where we might get more differences from what the real number would be in rural areas. Again, using this small level data. It's going to be greater when there are smaller numbers of people, particularly for individual racial groups. Now, if there's not a lot of racial groups, then going from 2 African Americans to 6 in a whole township is not going to have that much of an impact, is what the research is showing. So but it will impact those racial groups when there are small numbers. And it also is going to be greater in small districts. For example, your counties or your townships that may draw their own districts. The disclosure avoidance is going to impact them greater than what will impact you with the levels of geography that you're going to be drawing to. So that's something to be cognizant of for your compatriots in this redistricting efforts. But it could have a bigger impact when we're using smaller geography like precincts that are used in racial block voting analysis. Because we are, with racial block voting, looking at precinct level information and that small geographies, that's where we could see some impact on the racial block voting. Now, I'm not going to talk a lot about racial block voting because on Thursday, Lisa Hanley will be giving a half-hour presentation on racial block voting. She and I have talked about this for a long time, and we're trying to explore different avenues on this and what impact it might have. But it is something to just be cognizant. When you're using small geographies for the purposes of analysis, then you might have a bigger impact with disclosure avoidance. So ultimately, we may not know the impact of the disclosure avoidance system, that's the DAS. We may not know the impact of that on the data because we don't know what is real. The Bureau does not tell us that. The only thing they tell us is the total number of people in the state of Michigan. And we don't have an alternative to be able to cross-check. So we may not know how bad it is. Now, we are exploring and having alternative data sets to help analyze the process of the census itself. But when you get down to small geographic pieces within a city or something like that, we don't really have the numbers. That's why the census was there. But it's going to have some fudge factor in it this time. And so it's something to be cognizant of and be aware of as you're drawing in that regard. So let me throw open and ask if there are questions from anybody on this issue. Yes, Aaron, I see.
Kim, can you tell, you just said this time, so this is the first time in the census that we're including the What, I just had it written down.
Disclosure avoidance?
Yes, thank you.
Yes.
Disclosure avoidance. This is the first time in the census that we're incurring that. Is that correct?
That is correct. We did not use that before. The Census Bureau did not use it. However, the Bureau did something called, oh gosh, what was the name of it now? They basically did some degree of fudging of numbers, not to the degree that they're doing now, but they basically, what they did 10 years ago is they did what's called swapping. And so within a block group, like a neighborhood, for example, if indeed the block had 6 African Americans in that block, and somewhere else within that block group had 2 African Americans, maybe they would switch the numbers. So you couldn't know for that particular block exactly, well, is it 6, is it 2? But when you looked at the whole block group, it was correct. So that's what they did 10 years ago. So, you know, if I was drawing and I had a legislator that I'm drawing with, he may say, well, wait a minute, I just walked that census block 2 days ago, and I know there's only 2 African Americans here, and you're saying that there's 6. Well, it's within this block group where there's that swapping that took place. And most people kind of accepted that at that point. This time there's a little bit more openness in terms of it, and it's much more systematic, but it is totally different. And it is likely to lead to some differences, particularly what we're seeing on the racial side of things. So that's why it's important to be cognizant of that this time. Other questions, anybody? Nope. All right. Well, let me go back and share my screen again, and we'll continue on. So, all right. So what I want to do now is I want to go through and help you understand census racial data and the racial categorizations that are used and how it can be used in different uses in the redistricting process. So last Thursday, when I was presenting to you, the Census Bureau released new population estimates for Michigan. It was something that I knew was coming down the pike, and I couldn't get information quick enough to share it with you last Thursday. But they ended up doing new county level racial data for 2019. Previously, in the ones that I showed you last week, showed county level population, total population. But this time on Thursday, they released county level racial data on that side. So what I'm going to end up doing, and now, sorry, I'm going to shift the share again, and I'm going to flip back and show you a spreadsheet here of the data that they have come up with. And this is data that I'm going to end up sending to you and having for everybody's benefit so that you can look at it and review it to your heart's content. So what the Census Bureau has done is shown now these middle set of columns. And can you see those? Let me see if I can zoom any further out, if that's doable. Can everybody see these numbers? I'm worried that people on the diocese may not be able to see them. I'm going to talk about them, and you'll see them when we ship you out the data on that side for you to peruse them. But what we see in this, like last week's data tables that I sent to you, we have our JERG areas, those areas of the state that we had defined. And we use that to help define and look at the various racial categorizations that came out. We put together this table. It shows the 2010 populations by race. And in the middle part here, these columns here is showing the 2020 estimated populations by race. And then we looked at the change that is taking place. So for Wayne County, for example, we see it losing 79,000 people in these estimates. Again, these are not the official counts from the census yet, but these are estimates from the census. But we see the loss is happening within the African-American community, the Black community, as well as the white community in Wayne County. The Asians have increased and the Hispanics have increased. In the overall metro area, the whites have lost and African-Americans have gained in the metro suburban areas around Wayne County. So that's a significant shift of population and the makeup of population. So you'll end up seeing these differences both in the regions, Southern Michigan or the West Coast or the Thumb area, and you can see how things are changing in that regard. Down at the bottom of the spreadsheet is all that same information for each and every county in the state. That's the information that they have released on Thursday. So overall, in terms of the state estimates that came out, we're showing a statewide loss in the white population of 154,000 people in these new estimates. African Americans have loss of 17,000, a gain for the Asian community of 94,000, and a gain for the Hispanic community in 105,000 people statewide. When we look at the other tab in this spreadsheet, we can see the percent change in what's taking place. So we can look at and see where the differences, there's not large differences in the percentage terms, but certainly, and indeed on the white population, it's 2.2% loss, but it is a shift in terms of number of people. And that's the important thing. So we've put together this data table and we will ship that out to you and you can put it up on the website for everybody that they can look at this also in that regard. But what it also has let us do then is look at, let me go back to slideshow here from the current one. It lets us look at some maps and see this change that has taken place in the state of Michigan. And you can see that for the non-Hispanic white population, so for the white population, it is a loss mainly up in the suburban area around Wayne County. The only gains in the white population are 2 counties in the state, according to the data that just came out. And this is the percentage point change. A little bit different than percent change. This is the change in what concentration there is for the various racial groups. And so this is the data that now we can take a look at geographically. For the African-American population, you can see what I was mentioning to you before. The big gain was basically in Macomb County for the African-American community. So that was the big gain. And of course, the big loss in Wayne and up in the UP on that side. So you can see that difference in the African-American population. We also have the Hispanic population. Down in Central seems to be the biggest increase in the Hispanic population on that side. So that's the big instance in Hispanic population. And then for the Asian population, again, in the metro suburban area of Oakland where we've got the biggest change happening there for the Asian community. This is what's now being shown on the census data. The estimates, again, these are estimates. These aren't the final numbers. We will be duplicating all of this analysis and showing it to you when the final data comes out, starting on August 16th. But you can start seeing some trends, at least, which are important. So let's talk about racial data. In 2010, when the Census Bureau looked at race, they asked two separate questions. And that's an important distinction to realize. They asked first, question number 5, are you Hispanic or not? And if you are Hispanic, they asked you to categorize in the various subgroupings of Hispanic. And then a second question, entirely separate, is what is your race? And they gave you different checkbox on how you could do the race question. Keep in mind, these are two separate questions, and I'll show you the impact that this has. For 2020, again, it's two separate questions. The Hispanic, yes or no, and the subgroupings for Hispanics, and the racial data. They added some more examples in terms of race. So they put in Lebanese and Egyptian, and they looked at that as being white. So we get a little bit more definitions or guides from the Census Bureau in terms of how people can answer the question. But there is still basically 6 different racial groups that they're looking at. And you can check off up to all 6 of them if you wanted to. It is the person's choice of how many racial groups they want to be categorized with. That's going to have an impact in how we look at some of this data. So if we look at the race data that comes out, we have the white population, the African American or Black population, American Indian and Alaskan Native is there, the Asian population, Hawaiian, some other race, that bottom question. If you weren't one of these 5 main groups, you could check off some other race. And then there's the potential of having 2 or more races. This is the standard data set that the Census Bureau looks at and tallies. What does that do in terms of the racial counts? Well, if we look at race alone in this city that we looked at, not in Michigan, we had the white population of 41%, Black at 36%, some other race at 13%, and 2 or more, almost 3%. That's on race alone. But remember, I mentioned that Hispanics are not a race. Hispanics are a separate question. They're not a racial categorization for the Census Bureau. They're an ethnic group. So the question is how to deal with those. Because if you look at the city, Hispanics, when you tally that separately, that's 26% of the population here. But you can't add 26% to the 100%. You've got more people because you've got 2 different questions that are being asked. So what can be done? You see what happens, and what we have done, and what most people have done demographically, is looked at race by taking out the Hispanic numbers and treating them separately. So that 26 stays at 26, but the Hispanic Blacks come out, the Hispanic whites come out of the white category. So you pull out all the Hispanics, which you can, because the Census Bureau tallies both things and crosses them, cross-referencing them. So we can create now non-Hispanic race-alone categorizations and give you an accurate set of numbers, and they add to 100%. That's the key thing of looking at non-Hispanic and pulling them out of the different racial groups. So it makes sense to people. Now, I've said race alone. Well, what do you mean by that? Well, we have this other 2 or more races. How are they counted? When we did race alone, they had their own category. But if we want to take these 2 or more races and put them into the various races and all the races that people marked, then we need to do what's called a combined categorization. So this would be the racial group alone plus any combination of other races, but looking at just that racial group alone. So because of that, then you have a maximum set of numbers that you're dealing with. And you can see how this increases things, but it zeroes out that 2 or more race categorization. Well, when you do that, you end up with 103% in this city. So it's no longer 100%, but it is the combination of all the different possibilities, and it will increase the number of people in what it looks like being counted when you're looking at all the racial groups together. So this max number, we look at that as kind of the extreme. What is the ultimate number of whites or African Americans or Asians or Hawaiians? What is the maximum number that there is in the Census Bureau? The race alone categorizations are kind of the minimum number. That would be the lowest number that you might have for a particular race, because you're not taking into account basically the 2 or more races. So this gives you a range of data that you can use in your analysis, but you need to understand how it comes about. Just like what we did for the race alone by pulling out the non-Hispanics, we can do that on the max categories so that we can bring down this number, including Hispanics in here. And then in this instance, we're still over 100%, but not quite as much because we've taken out the 2 or more races. So the non-Hispanic race combined again gives you a maximum number for a particular racial group, but is not just that individual racial group. It includes other people. So when the Census Bureau brought this idea of having multiple races to the OMB and the federal government, they ended up looking at and defining their own categorization, basically looking at, instead of the total max, but kind of the partway max is what I'd call it. We call it the OMB categorization. And that is so that you get the OMB numbers slightly below the max numbers, but above the alone numbers. So the OMB number set kind of gets you close to, and you'll see on the far right-hand side, it's almost at 100%. But this can give you kind of a midpoint guide between the maximum, the combos, or the race alone categorizations. But take a look at how this changes the percentages for individual groups, depending upon how you're looking at them. It does change how you can look at the data and what kind of percentages you might receive in the census data. Now, I noticed, in 2010, we had in this city almost 3% saying 2 or more. Most demographers are looking at this number being higher in 2020 as more interracial marriages taking place and kids from interracial marriages being born. So we may see a larger percent of 2 or more races this time. We'll know that starting on August 16th when we get the PL data. You can do these same calculations on voting age population. So you have the same capabilities of seeing not only the concentrations of the racial groups on total population, but on voting age population. This double data set is what will be coming out in the PL file. And so it gives us the capability of looking at that further down the stepping stone stage of data in looking at that degree. This data can be used for one other factor in looking at the practical impact. Say that we have 50 members in the legislature using these racial data, and you can see that what the different categorizations of racial data mean in terms of what's the number of seats that could be distributed. Now, of course, seats distribution depends on redistricting and all of that, but this is what's called proportional representation. There is, under the Voting Rights Act, no requirement for proportional representation. Some activist groups would like it to be, but under the Voting Rights Act, there's no requirement for proportional representation. But it is a kind of a worthwhile guide for you to see, well, maybe what could we create or not create in terms of looking at then the populations that are here. So the proportional representation is one avenue that can be utilized to look at in terms of overall statewide or in a given area of the state, like our JERGs or that sort of thing. So this is a practical impact of how we can utilize these 3 times 2 for pop and voting age categorizations of race. And that's what you will see on an ongoing basis when we start drawing, because all of this kind of data will be there and you can make use of it. It can help you in understanding this kind of information. Just be aware that many of the minority groups would like to use the combo or the max numbers, and other people want to use the alone numbers. Those are your 2 extremes, and that's the way that you should look at this. But the census data and the PL file lets us do this kind of calculations. So that's what racial data would look like from the Census Bureau. And I want to throw it open to anybody that might have questions on that. And I'll stop share.
Kim, before we take questions, I just want to quickly two things for public record. We have Commissioner Eid, who's now present. And then second, for the review and approval of minutes, item 4 on the agenda, there were no minutes to address. So I just wanted to be clear on those 2 points. Sorry about that. And we do have questions. We have Commissioner Clark.
Yes,
Kim. This is Commissioner Clark.
Yes, sir.
I have a number of questions. Now, the data that we will see, let's presume we draw a district. The data that you just talked about, will that then display for us?
Yes.
Or do we have to go through some calculations?
No, as part of the software, what you will see is you'll see the map on the top part and you'll see a spreadsheet on the bottom. And as you draw and as you make changes in, add this township or take it away, all of the data in that spreadsheet will change. And the spreadsheet is set up so that you'll have multiple tabs. So you can see all of the different ways of looking at race, for example, or any other data that we might have. We will have the ACS data We will have Esri's data as some initial kinds of data before we get the PL. But all of that will be different tabs on the spreadsheet. So it'll be there to help guide you as you're making decisions on this area in or that area out.
So my opinion on that is that that's there for our analysis purposes. And when we analyze things, we may decide to adjust or not adjust a district based on those numbers.
Sure.
And Bruce and Lisa will provide their input relative to the numbers as well.
That's correct.
So we'll get their consultation on those.
Yes. Yep.
Okay. All right. My second question, and it kind of goes back to your presentation the other day. And you showed a slide of it today with the JERGs
Right.
that have been developed.
Right.
I understand what the JERG is. It's just a representation of the state in a geographical manner.
Right.
But I don't understand how the JERG is used combined with these districts. Could you explain that and what significance it is for us?
What the JERGs can be utilized is kind of giving you overall regions to think about. Now, when you draw, you're going to cross over the regions. I'll guarantee that to you. So they're not like walls that you can only draw within. But for the purposes right now, it gives you some global looks at how things account for. It can be utilized to, when we get the PL data, to look at the kinds of things that we were looking at last week of saying, well, how many seats could I draw in this area called JERG 1 or JERG 2 or whatever we were calling it. So those can be kind of guides for you. But again, they're not barriers that keep you only drawing within that territory. Unless you want to create some to do that, that's possible. You could create your own JERGs from that regard so that you're staying within your boundaries in that regard. So you've got the luxury in how you want to set up and how we want to ultimately analyze that information.
So what if I came to you and said, I don't want any JERGs? What implication would that be?
Not really anything. That's fine. If you don't want to use those, that's okay. We utilize them for kind of a first cut look at the various major regions in a state, trying to recognize some common ones that people recognize within the state. And I showed you, 3 different examples on Thursday of different ways of dividing the state. So, we tried to combine all the various options together into one set. But as I mentioned to you on Thursday, we can end up drawing a new set if that's what you desire, or we can not have them on at all.
So they're just a guideline for us to use as we district.
Right. That's correct.
Okay. Yeah, I don't, in my mind, I still don't understand how I would use a given JERG other than population.
It is population. It is kind of an overall guidance that you might be able to make use of. But as I said, it's not that it's going to put blinders on you that you can't go across the line. You can't color outside the boundaries, I guess is the way to, you have that possibility and luxury to do in redistricting.
Okay. See, when I first looked at that map the other day, because I went back and reviewed all this, you had talked about, I kind of equated the JERGs to congressional districts, and I mean, it's easy to do. They're close in
Sure,
number.
right.
Yeah.
But you
And
notice,
I know that's not the purpose.
right, but you notice that I purposely made sure that they were not relatively equal in populations either. that's part of the thing of what we wanted to bring out for your benefit of, well, look at what's UP and look at what's Upper Peninsula and all that kind of stuff of what the differences are that are based on geography, not based on anything else.
So I'll have to do this off the top of my head. So for one of the areas you hadn't observed, you had Grand Rapids and Kalamazoo, and I believe maybe even Lansing. And is that
Right.
because they're big cities? Is that why
Yes.
you did that?
That's what I did. Yes. When you looked at that central core of the state, you've got some major cities there. And so I was thinking, well, what happens if you were to look at all of those particular cities together as one entity? Yeah, it's got more people than is necessary for, different districts on that side, but it kind of gives you more of a city kind of look in the middle of the state.
Okay, thank you. I yield back, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Clark. And you have Commissioner Wagner with a hand raised.
Kim, I have a question.
Sure.
When you put the white category race up there and you included Egyptians, I'm assuming Arab Americans would be in that description as well, which would make their community of interest that much more important. Is that correct?
That would be correct. There was discussions within the Census Bureau and advocacy groups during this past decade of having a separate what's called MENA categorization, racial categorization for Middle Eastern. And there was a strong attempt to do that. And that was ultimately turned aside. And the Bureau decided that it was not big enough, or whatever they did, or who knows what ultimately came into their decision, but it was decided not to have that as a separate racial group. Now, in the next 10 years, for looking at 2030, maybe they'll come back and say, okay, now we see that we need a MENA category in that regard. But unfortunately for right now, for 2020, the Middle Eastern community is within the white community for the racial categorizations.
So EDS has a portion of your software that we can directly attribute to the Arab American community of interest though within the white group. You can portion those up.
Right. The Arab American community in the American Community Survey, not the official census, but the American Community Survey, that is a data set that we'll have access to and incorporate in so that we can see what that is. Again, those are estimates. They're a sample. It's not a full count, all of those kind of caveats, but at least we'll give you some idea of concentrations of where the Arab community might be.
Is there any other racial groups within the white description of the Census Bureau that we need to be made aware of?
There's probably a whole bunch of them. And we can take a look at that in terms of the American Community Survey. If I'm in Chicago, I'm concerned about the Polish community. That's a significant entity. If I'm up in Minnesota, probably the German community. That's a significant ancestry type community. All of those kind of information are available within the ACS, and we'll have that in there. But again, it's not complete counts. It's not going to be categorizations for everybody. But there are some neat maps that people have begun to do, and I've been collecting some of those just on Twitter the last couple of days. Somebody had all the different ACS ethnic groups categorized by county for the entire country. It was kind of an interesting map.
Thank you.
Other questions?
Commissioner Eid.
Hello? Can you hear me?
Yes, indeed.
Thank you. Thank you again for being here. Kind of to circle back on the last part of your presentation, you've mentioned a few times now that, due to non-disclosure, the census is, you use the term fudging, some of their numbers. Is there some, and you mentioned earlier that they're doing it in a systematic way, but how is this fudging going to look? Is it going to be like a range of variance? If it is a range of variance, is there like an alpha number or like a p-value associated with that to know how accurate the variance is? Yeah, is there anything like that?
Good question. Unfortunately, it's not within the data. They have, for large entities, some ideas in terms of that, but certainly down within more localized areas and the areas that you would be drawing with and that sort of thing, it's not going to be there. At least it's not there yet. Now, whether or not there has been talk within the Bureau of putting out some more information when they release the PL file, maybe it could get to what you're looking for. But as of right now, we're not seeing it. But it is a very good question. It's one that I've been asking too. So you're not alone on that side.
Well, yeah, I mean, it presents, the problem of questioning the variance. And I don't think any of us want to have to do that, especially considering the climate that this census was conducted under. So I'm just wondering if there's anything that the Bureau is doing to account, both for that variance and also the climate that this whole process was happening in.
Yeah. The only thing that they have really gone back with and relied upon is that when you look at higher geographic levels, that variance kind of goes away. So that's what they say statistically. It partly makes it a valid process. For us on redistricting, I'm real leery about that because I'm looking at the smaller levels. I'm looking at whether or not I put this precinct into this district or this, township may be okay, but small townships may not be all that okay. So, we'll have to kind of look at these. Part of what we will do is look at the PL file when it comes out and compare it against something. Like I just said, we've got Esri's data, we've got ACS data. We can start comparing and kind of looking at and evaluating. And maybe it's, we come back and say, geez, this really shows that they really undercounted Detroit or whatever the case may be. But those are the kinds of evaluations that we could do, but we won't be able to go down to the census block level and say it really was 25 people instead of the 45 that they've got in there now.
Thank you.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, let's just be aware of it going forward and do the best we can to make up for it on our end.
Right. And that's why I wanted to bring it to your attention, but you're right.
Kim, it doesn't appear that you have any further questions from any of the commissioners.
All right. I will, as I said, I will send everyone or send to Sue for the website, these PowerPoint slides, as well as the spreadsheet so that everybody will have that and anybody can look at those.
Thank you. We appreciate you taking the time to talk with us some more, and we look forward to continued discussion on data and all things consulting and developing us for this process. So we appreciate that.
Yep, no problem. That's why we're here.
And if there are no objections, moving along in our agenda, commissioners, we will have our executive director, Sue Hammersmith, come to us with reflections on the listening tour. And hearing no objection, we'll move on to item 6B on the agenda. And Sue, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Kellum. I thought it was a good time to take a check-in on our strategic plan and talk a little bit about our mission, our vision, our core values, and what we decided the critical success factors would be. For the public listening, and just as a reminder, our mission is to lead Michigan's redistricting process to assure Michigan's congressional, state Senate, and state House district lines are drawn fairly in a citizen-led, transparent process, meeting constitutional mandates. The commission's core values are integrity, respect, transparency, and being purposeful. But the critical success factors that were decided by this commission include Michigan citizens from across the state and with diverse backgrounds participate meaningfully in the redistricting process. The Constitution is upheld and always at the forefront. All actions are undertaken with a commitment to fairness. The code of conduct, policies, and procedures are followed. Discussion and deliberations occur in open meetings with the utmost transparency, and commissioners, consultants, and staff members work in an impartial manner to instill public confidence in the integrity of the redistricting process. I would say from my observations, the commission has done a very nice job of making sure that they're working toward these critical success factors. But I thought maybe it was time just for a check-in and to ask a few questions of the commission. Do you feel that you're on the right track to achieve the critical success factors, or would you suggest any course adjustments that might lead to a greater success? So that's my first question. Who'd like to jump in here? Is the commission on the right track to achieve its critical success factors, the ones I just mentioned? Or would any course adjustments lead to greater success? So do you feel you're on the right track? Do you feel that there's something differently that the commission could do or the staff could do to assist in your work? I'm just interested in hearing if anybody has any thoughts in that regard. Don't make me call on you. Okay. Doug.
I was going to jump in, but I see Commissioner Clark has a hand raised.
Thank you. I think that our critical success factor of transparency is working extremely well. I think Edward's done an excellent job of getting us on the right track and even pushing us further along. And I'm very happy how that's progressed at this point. I yield back.
Thank you. Anyone else like care to share? Commissioner Rothhorn.
I would say yeah, I also feel that we're on the right track. I do like the idea of doing some more community organizing or trying to do knocking on doors, public mail, that kind of, and I do think that one of the things that this gets to, so I guess what I mean to say is I'm pleased with it. I feel like we're on the right track and I want to keep going because I do feel like the urgency that we have to get to as many comments as possible has a lot to do with a legal strategy. I feel like when we're drawing maps and we have those comments and we could substantiate why we've got them, that feels like an important piece. So I don't want to give up and just sort of say but I do see that we're on the right track. And I do think that the idea of a ground game, so to speak, or like knocking on doors or having direct mail there could be some advantage to that. And I'll just say that that's also number two. That was sort of the aha moment that I had. I feel like when I heard, Edward and Rhonda talking about it, this idea that I think was shared a month ago or a week ago, rather, in Detroit. We were at the fellowship.
Yes, that there will be some direct mail, especially to areas with digital divide. And also some thoughts about knocking on doors and having community organizers or community leaders share more about the redistricting process and getting people engaged. Yes, anyone else?
I will just say, Sue, that I think that we are on track. I'm a bit of an optimist, and I always like to say when something seems like a very hard task, go slow to go fast. And I know, particularly with my peers in the commission and just in general with the process, there appears to be a lot of urgency, especially with deadlines and missing data and all the questions that come with that. But the part that we're doing now, the hearings and traveling, is the important part and a necessary part. And so even if I'm standing on this branch alone, I truly do believe in where we are right now and our ability to do the work regardless and to do it well, just because I think each of us is intentional and very serious about the job, and then we'll get it done. So I'm less anxious.
Thank you for sharing.
Commissioner Eid.
So it's a very interesting question, and it's a good one. You know, it's very good to debrief like this, you know, every once in a while so that everyone's on the same page. And I think we're certainly on the right track. You know, there are quite a number of difficulties that we've overcome and that we're continuing to overcome in this process. And it's been going well so far. And I'm really proud of that. I'm proud of all of us for being able to overcome those and do the work that we've been doing. But I also think we shouldn't rest on our laurels. You know, we have a lot of potential, and I think there still is a lot of potential with every commissioner, including me, especially me, where we can be even better. So I'd just say, you know, let's all keep that in mind too, and challenge ourselves so we can, you know, really be the best potential commission that we can be.
Thank you, Commissioner Eid. Anyone else? Anyone else have an aha moment they want to share? Is there anything that jumped out at you in any of the meetings that you were surprised by or that was a great learning for you? Commissioner Curry?
I guess I'm still surprised that so many people still don't know. Even here, I was walking out the door and the lady said, "Oh, you guys having a convention or something?" And I went to tell them what we were doing. And they said, "Oh, I never heard of that." So there's people everywhere that still do not know about the redistricting, drawing the lines and stuff. So I told them they need to come and have a voice and participate in the meeting tonight.
Thank you for sharing that. Yes, we continue to do everything we can to increase awareness, but there's a lot more work that we can engage in. Yes. Other comments? Commissioner Widgets.
So my, I guess, aha moment was kind of cemented in what I've been hearing in the public hearings. When we first started, people were saying, do your best to keep rural and urban areas. And then while we're going to different urban areas and listening to what they have to say as well, and stating that can be construed as systemic racism in a way, it really hit home to me at that point. I thoroughly believe that everyone who is elected to represent anybody should have both feet in each type of area, so that they have to actually represent a more broader and diverse set of individuals living in those districts.
Thank you for sharing that, Dustin, Commissioner Widgets. Other comments from people? I hear quiet. We'll move on to number 3.
I had my hand up, but you didn't see me, so I'll go ahead and say.
I'm sorry.
I don't know if it's an aha moment, but what I've really appreciated is being able to actually be with people. And when I'm there in person, especially going out and talking to the people in the audience and hearing why they, like how they heard about us and why they're here, you know, that they either are just there to listen like we are, or they're there to learn something because they think they can learn something from it, or that they are going to share their community of interest with us or something. I just really appreciate that. And it has made the work more enjoyable now that we can actually meet the people.
Makes it real, doesn't it? Thank you, Commissioner Orton. Anyone else?
I'll just second what Cynthia said, because it feels a little bit like the community organizing. And I do feel like I think I've tried to figure out what is my role here as commissioner, right? Staff do the operations and I'm doing governance, but the idea of doing outreach and being sort of with the people, that feels like a real way to use the status of being a commissioner. And I just wanted to say that sort of hit home when, what Cynthia said, like it hit home while being out here with the people.
Great. Thank you for sharing, Commissioner Rothorn. Anyone else? So the third question, what are the recurring themes you have heard that should be an integral part of the mapping process? Any recurring themes? I see Commissioner Zatella.
So I've heard lots of recurring themes, and something that I was thinking about a lot this last week is how we all have biases. And I'm actually taking a psychology class right now, and we're talking about data and decision making. And one of the concepts that came up is that people have a tendency to agree with things that align with their preconceived notions, and a tendency to reject things that don't align. And that really called me to question what I'm hearing. And so as a result of that, I'm going back through all the hearings, every single one. I'm re-listening to every single comment, and I'm actually creating a database for myself, which obviously will be publicly available, sort of categorizing comments, because I think we can put them into broad categories of keep rural separate or keep urban together or have fair and balanced districts. And I want to sort of tabulate them to see how much are we really hearing from each group, so that I can then look at that and be objective rather than having my bias potentially impact what I'm seeing as being the important criteria to redistrict. Because I want to make sure I'm being fair, and I want to make sure I'm hearing everybody, and that my own internal biases, I want to check them to make sure that I'm not giving them a stronger voice than people who are speaking. So that's something I'm personally doing. And when I'm done with it, I'll be happy to share it with everybody. And it's very detailed, but I mean, for me, that I feel like that data and looking at it closely is something that's important for me in evaluating what I'm hearing to make sure I'm being fair.
Thank you, Commissioner Zatella. Anyone else? Or are we going to wait for her to do that work? Commissioner Eid.
Yeah, I just want to, agree with everything Commissioner Zatella just said. I mean, I've been talking about bias since the beginning of this process, and it is a very important topic to talk about. And it's, why I kind of keep trying to hammer home taking a data and evidence-based approach, even though from what we just heard, evidently our data, isn't going to be, there's going to be some variance, but that's okay. We'll work through it. But, I really, it's very refreshing what you just said, Rebecca, and I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Any other comments anyone wants to share? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Sue, for getting us going with those reflections, and I would say engaging us and keeping the why central in our minds of why we're doing the work. So we'll move on, if there are no objections, to item 7, new business, 7A specifically, fairness and decision making. Hearing no objection, we'll have our executive director, Sue Hammersmith, come to us again and talk to us about fairness and decision making. Sue, you have the floor.
Thank you, Commissioner Kellum. And again, going back to our strategic plan, if we can go to the first slide, please. Our guiding principles, if you look in our mission, you can see the word fairly, and I did highlight those in red for us, but you're going to see the word fair very often. It becomes an integral part of our mission. It's an integral part of our vision. And if we look at our core values of integrity, respect, transparency, and being purposeful, it doesn't say fair, but it certainly implicates fair. Also, the core competencies as the commission works and the staff serves the commission, all our actions will exemplify honesty and professionalism. Our responsibilities and integrity are put above personal political gain. We engage in thoughtful and purposeful dialogue. Collegiality is fostered, and respect, tolerance, and equality are extended toward others. I've seen this demonstrated many times by the commissioners, and I do appreciate that these core competencies are certainly demonstrated in all your work. This is a little hard to see, but our goal number 1 is fairness. And you'll see in items 1, 2, and 4, the word fair each time, that we assure lines are drawn in a fair manner, that the line drawing contractor will present redistricting plans that are fair, including input from the public, guided by the RPVR BV analysis, and meet the criteria in the Constitution in rank order. Third, that the Voting Rights Act Legal Counsel will provide guidance to assure federal criteria are met, including equal population and adherence to the Voting Rights Act. This certainly speaks to fairness, even though it doesn't use that word. And the fourth strategy is Michigan residents will have a fair and meaningful opportunities to participate in the process through the public comment and the proposed submission of maps. This next chart is a little hard to see, but in our individual decision-making, the easiest way to decide is just simply to decide alone and announce your decision. So when the toddler is running toward the street with the racing cars, you take action very quickly in that decision. But there are other ways that you can make decisions, from gathering information to gathering information from people that you speak with through, that would be like through our public comment tool. You can still make decisions alone, or you can make decisions as a group. But what this basically shows is the higher the level of involvement, the more time it's going to take. So just so we realize through engaging the public comment that we certainly want, and we want to engage as much as possible. It will take more time to compile that data, but it's such important data for us to use. A little bit about consensus decision-making. What is consensus? It involves good faith effort to reach the best possible outcome among the relevant stakeholders and maximize possible gains. What it isn't is majority rules. So since 1876, we've talked about Robert's rules. Well, we haven't, but others have. And groups have relied on majority rule. That's how things happen very often. It's much faster than consensus. However, consensus tends to build agreements that are more stable, more efficient, and wiser than majority rule. Consensus is reached whenever the group as a whole body agrees that they can live with whatever is proposed after every effort has been made to get as close as possible. So just another way to think about how this group might want to consider their decision-making as they move forward into the mapping process. So why is consensus important? It does offer a way to increase mutual trust, respect, and commitment. It can help establish a common understanding and framework for developing a solution that works for everyone. So, and at the opposite end of the spectrum, it would transform adversarial interactions into a cooperative search for data and common ground. It's important because it invites widespread participation to increase the quality of solutions, and it offers a way to collaborate to solve complex issues that are most acceptable to all. And of course, in this case, it's the creation of 161 districts on our Michigan maps. So there are 5 basic steps to consensus decision making. One is to set the expectations, and I think our strategic plan clearly states how the commission will work together, and includes our core values and how we will operate. 2, determine the participant ground rules. So the participants are primarily the commission in this case, but there are also many stakeholders, including those who make public comment, and that impacts the whole state in the end. There are many people behind the scenes who are affected by the outcome of the decision, some of whom may work to block a decision that affects them. And the commission must seek to discern if people speaking on behalf of a group truly represent that group, and given the geography and varying communities of interest, where to place the lines on the maps. The commission will need to address reluctance to participate if individuals feel they're being forced to sell out or give in for too little. And we need to continue to explore alternatives until the best one is reached. The fourth step of the process is to engage everyone in framing and reframing the options. So this can include fact-finding. It could include brainstorming, creating mutually advantageous approaches, considering information from the experts, dealing with differences in constructive ways, seeking to create joint ownership and learning and growing together. And fifth is reaching agreement. So this is when I see the maps being developed, and then there will be a round of second public comments. So certain criteria suggested for a consensus decision-making process would include being driven by our mission and vision, guided by our core values and core competencies, encouraging listening to others and being respectful in face-to-face conversations. I see that a lot with the commission. Incorporating the data and the public comment, encouraging participants to challenge assumptions and fully explore alternatives, keep the participants engaged in learning, and a commitment to significant efforts to seek consensus and reach consensus. What do we anticipate outcomes would be in this type of decision-making process? The best possible agreements, minimizing deadlock, the quality of solutions and creating the maps is increased. Participation will increase knowledge and build relationships. The information and comprehensive analyses are understood and accurate. Engagement in and ownership of the process. Shared learnings are extended beyond the immediate group, so beyond the commission, out to the general public, to the people of Michigan. The outcomes will serve the common good of the people of our state. And lastly, that the outcomes will be fair. So it's a little bit on consensus decision-making. I would ask if there are any questions or comments or thoughts from the commission.
Any questions or thoughts, commissioners?
I don't have any questions. I think that the presentation is excellent, Sue. And it should be something that we can cogitate on for the next few weeks when we get to the point of actually drawing maps. I certainly feel that doing it in a consensus manner would be preferable and yield a better result than motions and votes, but that's always a fallback position too.
Okay, commissioners, thank you. And thank you, Sue, again for that presentation. I again echo and agree that a collaborative spirit is better for the result that we're trying to get towards, which is, of course, transparency, but above all, fairness. Moving along the agenda, if there are no objections, we will move to item 8, recommended future meetings and agenda items. And hearing no objections, I'll have our executive director, Sue Hammersmith, third time's a charm, come to us again and discuss some things that we need to take note of.
I guess I'm making up for lost time after missing the last meeting. I watched, but I wasn't able to be here. So at the last meeting or between meetings, there was lots of conversation about really getting the redistricting process committee going earlier than the original proposed date. So the Michigan Department of State agreed to schedule virtual meetings for this Friday, June 25th, and Monday, June 28th from 9 to 2 p.m. On Friday, Kim Brace from EDS will be with us and his team, several members of his team. And on Monday, Bruce Adelson from Federal Compliance will be with the committee. And of course, all commissioners are welcome to watch the meeting of the committee. After these two meetings, a special commission meeting is being proposed for Wednesday, June 30th. We'll be in Grand Rapids at that point in time, but from 9 to 1 p.m. and that meeting could also be virtual. So we will plan on Zoom meetings for those 3 meetings if it's the will of this commission. At that Wednesday meeting, we're proposing only 2 topics. So it will be the redistricting process that the committee is going to present and prepare the options and suggestions for how this group moves forward. And then also a future meeting schedule. So going forward, after the public hearings end, we'll have our July 8th meeting, then could be changed to a regular commission meeting from 9 to 4. That will be an in-person meeting, as will all meetings starting in July. On July 15th, we have the Benton Harbor meeting. That's from 5 to 8 p.m. And then after that, we want to talk to the commission about what do you believe the hours are that you anticipate needing going forward over the next few months. So the Michigan Department of State and your staff for the MICRC can put together options and recommendations for all the logistics of the in-person meetings, which are many. And maybe Sarah would like to say a few words at this point about some of the logistics involved in the in-person meetings.
Yes, thank you so much, Executive Director Hammersmith. Happy to kick off with a bit of a suggestion or recommendation as to how to frame that discussion regarding the Commission's future meeting schedule. First and foremost, I want to acknowledge that during Thursday's meeting and in meetings during weeks and months prior, us and your staff have all heard the Commission express a need for additional time to do the work that lies in front of you as you head into this next phase of the Commission. And it's certainly important that you do have the time that you need to do that. As you know, post June 30th, this June 30th proposed virtual meeting is the last opportunity for this commission to have a virtual meeting. Going forward from that date, all meetings will be required to be in person. And our department and your staff do a lot of logistical work and preparation to support the commission for each meeting. And that's in addition to regular deliverables that are provided for each meeting. In-person meetings require work prior to the meeting, including acquiring a venue and AV contractor, working with volunteers and staffing to make sure that the public comment table is staffed, and also the drafting of notices and agendas. And also after the meeting, there's quite a bit of work to do for us as well, including meeting minutes, the review and posting of transcripts and more, and also prepping for the next meeting. And of course, our department and your staff are 100% committed to supporting this commission and happy to undertake these tasks. But I say this to note that these tasks do take time for us to accomplish. So returning to the recommendation or request that we have of you when we when you all partake in this discussion and deliberate what your future meeting schedules will look like, is to frame it as Director Hammersmith said, not in terms of what days the commission would meet, but in terms of how many hours for you all would be sufficient to accomplish the work that is required of you as you move into this next phase. If you can produce that number of hours, we're happy to take that and produce a recommendation of several options for scheduling that will work for each commissioner with your unique schedules, as well as provide us and your staff with the time and resources to provide the logistical support to ensure the success of the commission. One additional point to consider, as Director Hammersmith noted, the agenda topic suggestion for really engaging in this discussion is during the special commission meeting taking place Wednesday, June 30th. As you all know, a subcommittee has been established to establish processes for how you all will work with your contractors. And one recommendation is that once that those recommendations have been provided to the full commission and the process has been established, that will likely give the commission quite a bit of additional insight into how the work process will go as you move into this next phase and how many hours will be required of you to complete the work, the important work that is in front of you. And one final point that I have on this is that, if the commission is agreeable to providing us the number of hours and is agreeable to one of the recommendations that we're able to provide to you, if as you move into this next phase, you find that it's not enough time or less likely it's more time than you need, the commission is always able to make adjustments upward or downward in terms of how much time you need. That is certainly something that you are all able to do. So with that, I will yield back and I'm happy to answer any questions on that.
Thank you, Michigan Department of State.
There is a resolution, but Julianne just noted that it references the agenda, so it should say that the attachment would be our agenda. So if we would make that edit to the resolution, just the attachment would be our agenda for today. If the commissioners choose to adopt these committee meetings on June 25th and 28th, and a special commission meeting on the 30th to work on the redistricting process. And also to change July 8th from the committee meeting to the regular commission meeting.
Commissioner Zatello.
I'm just curious for the July 8th meeting, do we really need to have a 9 to 4 meeting on that day? That just seems very long. And what's the thought process behind having such a long meeting?
It was originally scheduled that long because that was when the redistricting process committee was going to meet, and they felt meeting with both consultants and coming up with their options to present to this commission would require a full day. It's been since split into those 9 to 2 days, which may or may not go all the way till 2. However, I'm not sure what could or should be on the agenda. I think a lot of that will come out of the process. So we can adjust accordingly when we get the process committee work a little further down the road. We'll know more.
Commissioners, are there any other questions or thoughts? Yep. Go, Commissioner Rothorn.
So my hunch is that if we have it scheduled with a start time, I don't know that we need to have do we always have to have an end time?
General Counsel.
Thank you, Madam Chair. No, certainly the meeting time, when the business before the body is concluded, it may adjourn.
Thank you. So it just seems like, yeah, if we, for ourselves, like maybe recognize that we're freeing up our schedule for the day, but we may not, yeah, but if we don't need to meet, then we don't need to meet, right? We finish when we finish. But the idea of starting at 4 p.m. is different than starting at 9 p.m. And so I like the idea of starting earlier and just sort of being prepared for a longer day. But in reality, we're a quick group that loves to work together. So we're just going to be just fine.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Lang.
Can I just move to approve the new hearing? Make a motion to approve it as written. Or not hearing, the meetings.
For clarification, are you, Commissioner Lang, are you talking about the resolution?
Yes, the resolution with the subcommittee meetings, moving those to the new dates, and then the January 8th whole committee meeting.
Okay, I have a motion made by Commissioner Lang and a second made by Commissioner Rothorn. Is there any discussion or debate on the actual motion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify with a raised hand and saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, please raise your hand and signify with nay.
Nay.
The ayes have it. The motion carries. The resolution 2021-63 with the, I'm sorry, 0603 with the attached agenda has been approved. Commissioner Clark, I'm sorry, I was looking down.
This is Commissioner Clark. I'd like to make a suggestion for July 8th, and I don't know if it's feasible or not. But at some point in time, we need Kim or somebody from EDS to begin to train us on the tool, the mapping tool. And that might be an appropriate time to do that, at least get started with it.
Are there any thoughts? Okay, just checking, no pressure. I'm just making sure. Okay, commissioners and Sue, if there's nothing further for.
I just wanted to mention that I did send out some initial questions I have received from the commissioners that will be sent to EDS and also to federal compliance. I sent you the list this morning. If you have additional questions, will you please get those to me by 5 o'clock tomorrow afternoon? And that way I can send the comprehensive list to both Kim Brace and Bruce Adelson, so they can begin working on the questions that the commission has for our meetings on Friday and Monday.
All right, commissioners, you're so quiet today. I'm feeling like I'm not seeing a hand or anything. If we don't have anything else for Sue, we are going to move, if there are no objections, to announcements. And hearing no objection, we will move to announcements. Are there any announcements for the good of the order?
Commissioner Cullum?
Yes, Commissioner Eat.
I'd just like to take a moment to thank the Michigan Department of State staff. Y'all don't have an easy job. I imagine your job is actually very difficult, and I appreciate y'all working with us in this stressful environment to help us get this important job done. It's a hard job, and we're getting it done, and that's what matters at the end of the day. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Eid. Are there any other announcements for the good of the order? Hearing none, I will move on the agenda to adjournment. We have no further items on the agenda and no further business to discuss. Is there a motion on the floor for adjournment? Motion made by Commissioner Witches.
Second.
Second made by Commissioner Lett. Any debate or discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please raise your hand and say aye. Aye. All those opposed, raise your hand and say nay. The ayes have it, motion carries. The meeting is adjourned at 2:45 p.m. Thank you, commissioners. And